The night was colder than usual, and the chill in Ned Stark's bones had nothing to do with the damp of the dungeon cell beneath the Red Keep. He sat quietly in the corner, his once noble clothes torn and dirt-stained, beard thick and unkempt. But his spirit, though tested, remained unbroken. There had been no mercy from Joffrey, no justice in King's Landing. But fate, cruel and strange, had decided his story would not end on the executioner's block dot. It happened during the dead. Of night, when the guards had grown drunk on stolen wine and overconfidence. Varys, the spider, cloaked in shadows, appeared outside Ned's cell. "Lord Stark," he whispered, "if you want to live, now is the time." Ned didn't trust Varys, but he trusted the truth of his own doom more. Execution waited at sunrise. Escape, even if it meant exile, meant hope got with the help of Varys, and a few gold coins slipped into greedy hands. Ned was smuggled out of the dungeons in a cart full of waste, bound for the outskirts. He was weak, barely able to walk, but his name and honor had already been broken. His pride would not stop him now. He had no illusions of reclaiming Winterfell or avenging the betrayal. His only wish was to protect his children. If he couldn't rule, he could at least live, perhaps guide from the shadows. And so, with a false identity and Varys' secret support, Ned rode north. But it took weeks to reach the wall. He traveled under the name Joran, claiming to be a man shamed by dishonor, seeking redemption in the Night's Watch. The Black brothers asked no questions. They welcomed him in Castle Black, not knowing they were taking in the former hand of the king. Maester Aemon, perhaps suspecting the truth, said nothing. Jon Snow, his son, didn't recognize him immediately. Ned's hair had grown gray, and he wore a hood more often than not. But one night by the fire, Jon looked into his eyes and knew. "Father?" he whispered, trembling. Ned hushed him quickly. "Not here. Not now. You must say nothing. I am Joran now. If the world knows I live, they'll come for me and you." Jon understood, though his heart ached with confusion and joy. They spent time in secret, speaking quietly when alone. Ned explained what happened, why he had to disappear, and how much he regretted leaving his daughters behind. Jon, himself burdened with truths of his parentage he did not yet know, could only promise his father they would fight for justice one day. Meanwhile, rumors swirled across Westeros. Some whispered that Ned Stark's ghost walked the wall. Others claimed he'd died in the dungeons like a true northern wolf. Sansa, locked in King's Landing, clung to the belief her father had died nobly. Arya, lost and alone, vowed vengeance. Robb raised his banners in open rebellion. The North remembered, and the war had already begun. At Castle Black, Ned remained quiet but observant. He watched the uneasy peace between the brothers, saw how the wildlings stirred beyond the wall, and how the winds of winter carried darker threats than Lannister gold. He listened to Jon speak of White Walkers, dead men with blue eyes, and the eerie chill that crept through the trees. "You believe this?" Ned asked one night, staring into the fire. "I saw them," Jon said simply. "They're real." And so Ned Stark, once Lord of Winterfell, once Hand of the King, now a nameless brother of the Watch, realized that the wars of men were only the beginning. The real enemy was not in King's Landing. It was out there in the darkness beyond. The wall waiting, and he knew he had one last duty left. Life on the wall was harsh, but Ned Stark adapted faster than anyone expected. He was a man forged in the cold of Winterfell, and though the walls of Castle Black were crumbling, the resolve in his heart was stronger than ever. Unlike most new recruits who whined and fought against the cold or the orders of the brothers, Ned blended in as Joran, the quiet, older man who worked harder than anyone else. He took no special treatment, asked for no favors, and never acted superior. Most of the brothers assumed he was a disgraced northern knight, trying to find peace in exile. Only a few, like Mr. Aemon, dared to guess the truth, and even he kept his mouth shut. Jon struggled with the secret. Watching his father swing a practice sword or sit in quiet thought by the fire made his heart burn with questions. He wanted to tell Sam, to tell someone, but Ned had warned him if the Lannisters ever learned he was alive, they'd send assassins, or worse, declare war anew. Jon had seen enough blood and enough betrayal to know his father was right. One evening, as snow fell thick over the wall, a raven came bearing grim news. Robb Stark had won a battle in the Riverlands, but lost men, and worse, had lost ground too. The Tywin Lannisters' counterattack. Ned clenched his fists when he read the note passed in secrecy from Mr. Aemon. His son was out there, fighting a war sparked by his own downfall. Every casualty was a weight on his chest. Every Stark lost was another ghost he carried. He spent the night walking along the wall, high above the earth, where the wind bit through his cloak. Ghost followed silently, eyes glowing in the dark, and Jon soon joined him. "You should be with Robb," Ned said quietly, his voice barely above the howling wind. "And leave the watch?" Jon asked, uncertain. "I swore an oath." "Your oath doesn't mean much if the realm falls to darkness. I saw men lie under the banner of oaths in King's Landing. Oaths don't protect the innocent. Actions do." Jon shook his head. "But the real war, it's here. The White Walkers, the dead. They're coming, Father." Ned paused. The fire in Jon's eyes reminded him of Lyanna. He had always believed in the living world, in justice, honor, and truth. But Jon believed in something greater, something more terrifying. And perhaps, he thought, perhaps he was right. The next few weeks brought chaos. Reports of missing rangers, wildling movements, strange sightings in the woods, men muttering about shadows with blue eyes. Even hardened brothers began to fear the dark. Then came the night a group of bodies was found near the Frostfangs. Men who should have been dead cold, unmoving, suddenly rose and attacked a patrol. Jon saw it. Ned didn't doubt his word anymore. Castle Black went on alert. The Lord Commander held meetings every night, and Ned, though officially a low-ranking brother, was allowed to attend under the guise of experience. He spoke rarely, but wisely, and it wasn't long before the others began turning to him for counsel. They saw something in him, a calm strength that couldn't be learned. Still, he knew time was short. Winter was coming faster than expected, and with it, an army of the dead. Ned began preparing. He trained harder, helped stock weapons, and wrote secret letters by night letters meant for trusted northern houses, sent by Raven in the dead of night, sealed not with his name, but with the direwolf sigil of House Stark. One such raven was sent to Bear Island, another to White Harbor. He dared not write to Robb, too risky. But he sent word to the old bannermen, those who remembered his father, who still believed in the North. "If the wall falls," he wrote, "the North must rise." And though he felt shame for hiding in black robes while his children bled, he knew this was the only way he could serve them now. To watch, to prepare, to survive. Because the true enemy wasn't wearing a crown in King's Landing. It was already marching beneath the snow. The sky above Castle Black was a solid sheet of gray, thick with snow that never seemed to stop falling. The cold no longer bit. It sank deep into the bones and stayed there. The men of the night's watch were growing anxious. It wasn't just the weather or the tailies of White Walkers anymore. Something in the air had changed. The animals grew restless. The ravens cawed in warning, and even the fires felt colder. Ned could feel it too, a silence in the world, like the breath held before a scream. John spent his days patrolling and his nights preparing. He no longer doubted his visions, nor did he try to convince others of the truth. He trained the new recruits harder, shared what he knew with Samuel Tarley, and quietly coordinated with his father, still Joran, to the rest of the watch. Together, they studied old texts, ancient stories, anything that could shed light on the enemy no one had truly faced in thousands of years. One night, Sam came running into the armory, eyes wide with fear and breath frozen on his lips. "There's something you need to see," he said. They followed him to the Mester's tower. Mester Aemon sat silently beside a scroll, so old the ink had faded into brown. "It speaks of a time before the first men," he said, his voice thin. "A time when ice walked and fire wept." The old man's fingers trembled as he pointed to the passage. "The dead do not come to conquer, they come to cleanse." John looked to Ned. "They mean to destroy all life." "And they've done it before," Ned muttered. It became clear that Castle Black could no longer afford to be just a post for criminals and lost souls. It had to become a fortress. Ned, drawing on his years of command in Winterfell, began organizing the brothers in secret. Tunnels were reinforced. Arrows were sharpened. Stores of dragonglass, rare and nearly forgotten, were unearthed by Sam from old Night's Watch records. "You should be leading us," John whispered to his father one morning as they trained alone. Ned shook his head. "That part of me is gone. They won't follow Eddard Stark, not here. But they might follow a bastard with fire in his blood." John frowned. "I'm not—" "You are more than you know, John," Ned interrupted gently. "One day I'll tell you everything, but not yet. The wall needs you to be strong now, not questioning your blood." Despite the rising danger, news from the Mai south continued to trickle in. Sansa was still trapped in King's Landing. Arya had vanished. Robb was pushing deeper into the Riverlands, gaining victories, but at a steep cost. Winterfell had been left vulnerable. Then came the word that shook Ned to his core. Theon Greyjoy, once raised in his own household, had taken Winterfell. Raven came during a blizzard, the seal cracked by Mester Aemon's hand. John found his father sitting in stunned silence after reading it, fists clenched, eyes distant. "He was like a son to me," Ned whispered. "I gave him shelter. I taught him to fight, to read. And now he burns my home." John didn't know what to say. Rage boiled in his blood. "Let me go. Let me take the black cloak off and ride." "No," Ned snapped. "That's what they'd want. The moment you leave, you're no longer protected. You're just a Stark with a target on your back." "Then what do we do?" Ned stood, slowly, but with new fire. "We make sure there's a north left to defend when this is over. Let them kill each other in the south. We'll hold the line here." But holding the line was no longer enough. A horn sounded once, twice, then a third time. The wall froze. The third blast had not been heard in 1,000 years. "Riders from beyond the wall," someone whispered. "No," said Ned, "not riders." "Dead men?" The brothers scrambled to their posts. Ned grabbed a sword, and John stood beside him. They looked out into the snow-blind distance as shadows began to move beyond the trees. The war that no one believed in was here. And Ned Stark, once Lord of Winterfell, once condemned to die, now stood where the realm would make its final stand. The blaring echo of the third horn lingered in the frozen air like a curse. Every man on the wall stood still, their breath catching in their throats. It wasn't a sound of warning. It was a death knell, a signal from the old days that had passed into legend. 3 blasts meant the worst. White Walkers. Ned gripped his sword, the hilt slick with cold sweat despite the freezing temperature. Beside him, Jon Snow's face had gone pale, but his eyes were locked forward, focused and unshaken. The snow below the wall was shifting, not blowing, not drifting, but moving with purpose. Shadows appeared between the trees, silhouettes that didn't sway like living men, and the eerie silence that followed the horn blast told them all they needed to know. The dead had arrived. "Raise the gates," Lord Commander Mormont ordered, voice rough but steady. "No one goes out. Every man to the top. Archers ready, we hold." The brothers of the Night's Watch scrambled. Arrows were loaded. Oil pots were lit. Dragonglass daggers, previously thought to be little more than decoration, were handed out with trembling hands. Sam clutched one close to his chest, like a relic. Ned and John took position atop the wall, peering into the ghostly white landscape below. Then out of the trees, the first corpse stumbled into view. A ranger, face frozen, eyes glowing blue, moving with an inhuman stillness. Behind him came others, men once sworn to the watch, now returned as tools of death, dozens and hundreds. And beyond them, taller figures, pale as bone, riding. Skeletal horses with swords that shimmered like moonlight, white walkers. The attack came fast and brutal. The dead didn't shout or scream. They moved like a wave of silence, climbing the base of the wall, clawing through stone and ice with unnatural strength. The brothers fired arrows, dropping the first line of corpses, but they just kept coming. For every one that fell, 3 more took its place. "We can't hold this alone." John shouted over the wind, "We're not meant to." Ned shouted back, his voice hoarse, "We're meant to warn the realm." But who was left to listen? Suddenly, Ghost let out a deep, savage growl. The great direwolf stood at the edge of the wall, fur bristling. From the edge of the woods, more figures appeared, but not dead. Wildlings, dozens of them, bearing torches and weapons, charging toward the chaos. Ned's eyes narrowed. "They're not attacking," John gasped. "They're helping." Among them, a giant roared, swinging a massive club and sending corpses flying through the air. At their center was a woman with bright red hair and fierce eyes, Ygritte, and with her, Tormund Johnsbane, rallying his people with curses and war cries. "They're fighting the dead," John breathed. "The Night's Watch and the Wildlings, enemies for centuries, suddenly found themselves side by side on the battlefield." The line between friend and foe dissolved in the face of extinction. Down below, chaos erupted. Ned could no longer stand idle. He looked at John, his eyes burning with a father's love and a commander's will. "I'm going down." John grabbed his arm. "You'll die. We all will if we don't fight like men." And then he was gone, disappearing into the lift that took him down the wall. John watched as his father, cloaked not in fur and armor, but in simple black, leapt into the battle like he had never left it. He fought like the Ned Stark of stories. He moved through the dead with the grace of a wolf and the fury of a storm. For the first time in years, John saw the man his siblings had always spoken of, not just a father, but a legend. The battle raged through the night. Fire lit the darkness. Screams echoed off the wall. Men fell. Corpses rose. And through it all, Ned and John fought side by side whenever fate brought them together, dot by dawn. The ground below the wall was a frozen graveyard. The dead had retreated, not defeated, but repelled. For now, men wept. Some prayed. Others sat, silently, staring at the sky as the first hint of light broke through the clouds. Ned stood, bruised and bleeding, his sword arm trembling. John approached him quietly, Ghost limping by his side. "You should rest," John said. "We don't rest," Ned replied. "Not until the realm believes." He looked north, beyond the wall, into the white wilderness. "They're coming back," he whispered. and next time we may not survive." The battle had ended, but Castle Black felt no victory in the silence that followed. The air was heavy with grief and dread. Bodies, both living and dead, lay across the snow-covered ground. The flames that had burned the whites now flickered, low, casting long, twitching shadows against the ice. The survivors moved like ghosts, dazed and bruised, dragging wounded comrades to the infirmary and burning what corpses they could. Every fallen brother was a story ended. Every face lost reminded John and Ned what they were truly up against. Ned stood near the pyres with Mr. Amon and Sam, watching the flames consume what remained of the cursed dead. His black cloak was torn and singed, his face cut and bloodied. Yet there was no pain in his eyes, only clarity. "We held them off," Sam said, voice low. "We actually stopped them." "No," Ned replied grimly. "We survived, that's all. They weren't trying to break the wall tonight. They were testing us, seeing how ready we are." Sam swallowed hard, his hand tightening on the hilt of the dragonglass dagger at his side. "Then what do we do?" "Now we prepare," Ned said. "And we send word to every corner of the realm. This threat isn't a northern tale anymore. It's coming for all of Westeros." Mr. Amon nodded in solemn agreement. "But they won't listen. They never do. Not until it's far too late." A dark truth, but Ned already knew it. The lords of the South would laugh off any letter from the Night's Watch. They'd scoff at warnings from Joran, a nameless brother clad in black. But Eddard Stark, the Lord of Winterfell, who was supposed to be dead, his words might carry weight if he revealed himself. That night, Ned sat alone in his quarters, a single candle burning beside him. He unrolled a fresh scroll, dipped the quill, and hesitated. To sign his name would be to declare his return, to paint a target on his back. But what choice did he have? He thought of Robb, bleeding for the North, of Arya, missing, of Sansa, caged in a lion's den, of Bran and Rickon, lost in a burned Winterfell. His family was scattered like ash on the wind. He signed it. Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell, Warden of the North. He sent 5 ravens that night. 1 to Robb, 1 to House Manderley, 1 to House Glover, 1 to the Eyrie, and 1 to Dragonstone. Addressed to Stannis Baratheon, Jon found him afterward, still at the desk. "You've sent the truth, haven't you?" "I have," Ned said softly. "I can hide no longer. My death was a lie forced upon me. But if I keep hiding, the realm may face a death far worse." Jon nodded, but his face was troubled. "And what if they come for you? What if they send assassins or bounty hunters? What if Joffrey wants your head again? Then I'll die as I should have, with a sword in my hand, not my head on a block." A day later, a scout returned from the woods beyond the wall. A half-dead wildling, barely able to stand. He carried no weapon, just a message burned into his chest by fire. "We are coming." The wildlings were spooked. Even Tormund, fierce and stubborn, admitted his people were on the edge of breaking. "They're marching," he said, "and they don't sleep. They don't eat. We move, and they follow. We hide, and they find us. There's no fortress beyond the wall that can stop them," Ygritte added. "Your wall's the last one, and it's already cracked." Ned stood before the gathered watch and wildlings in the mess hall. His voice was calm but unflinching. "Then we make our stand here, not as brothers of the watch, not as wildlings, but as men, living men." He revealed himself that night, pulled back his hood, spoke his true name. Some gasped. Others fell to their knees. Not everyone believed it, not at first. But when Jon Snow stood beside him and claimed him as his father, the truth took root. Ned Stark is alive, the ravens would carry. And so the realm stirred again. But far to the south, in King's Landing, a different fire began to burn. A raven arrived on Circe's balcony, bearing a scroll marked with a direwolf sigil and sealed in the name of the man she thought dead. She read the name once, then again her wine goblet slipped from her fingers, and she whispered, "He lives." The hall of the Red Keep was silent, save for the slow clink of Queen Circe's goblet as it rolled across the floor, its spilled wine staining the marble like fresh blood. The message lay open on the table, the ink still wet with the weight of truth that should have been impossible. Eddard Stark, alive, at the wall. The name should have been dust by now. His head should have rotted on a pike, long forgotten, buried beneath war and wine. But now the ghost of Winterfell had returned, not with an army, but with a warning. Across the room, Tyrion read the letter slowly, frowning. It's his handwriting, his tone. If someone forged it, they know him better than his own wife. Circe's hands trembled with fury. This is impossible. We saw him confess. Joffrey had him executed. Tyrion raised an eyebrow. Did he? Or did he have someone executed under a hood, and you never questioned it? She turned on him like a viper. You think I'm blind? I think you were so eager to see the wolf fall that you didn't look too closely at the corpse. The court was soon in uproar. Word spread fast. The Lannisters called for ravens, spies, and assassins. If Ned Stark had survived, he could rally the North again. Worse, he could expose everything. The lies, the incest, the betrayal that sat upon the Iron Throne. Circe ordered gold cloaks north and whispered threats to the citadel to silence. The message, but it was too late. The news had reached Robb Stark-Gott when Robb read the letter. His hands trembled not with fear, but something deeper. Grief twisted with relief. For all his battles, all his rage, all the blood he'd spilled, he'd done it believing his father was dead. Now that anchor of purpose shifted. Ned Stark lived, and the war had changed Dot at Castle Black. Ned waited for the responses. The first. Raven returned from the Eyrie. Lady Lysa had written in trembling ink, paranoid and vague. She offered no men, no aid, only silence. Cowardice cloaked in motherhood. The second came from House Manderley. We have always served the Starks. We? Remember, we are ready. Others followed. The North began to stir like a bear in winter, slow but deadly. Glover, Sherwin, even the Umbers, though fractured by the war, sent messages of loyalty. Ned met each message with a renewed sense of duty. If the North was to rise again, it needed guidance, and it needed truth. That night, he took Jon to the crypts below Castle Black. The torches flickered as they descended past frozen stone and forgotten kings. I promised your mother I'd keep you safe, Ned said quietly. Jon stiffened. What are you saying? Ned stopped before a sealed alcove. Your mother was not some tavern girl. She was Lyanna, my sister. Jon staggered back, the words hitting him like a sword to the chest. That's not possible. She died giving birth to you. I took you in as mine to protect you from Robert Baratheon's wrath. If he had known who you truly were. Jon's eyes were wide, his breath shallow. Then who was my father? Ned looked away, guilt and love warring in his eyes. Rhaegar, Targaryen. The silence that followed was long and unbearable. Jon leaned against the cold stone, hands shaking. I'm a Targaryen? You are Stark and Targaryen both, ice and fire. Jon felt the truth settle into him, a storm he hadn't expected. He had always believed himself nothing, a bastard, a shadow in a lord's hall. But now he was something far more dangerous. I don't want a crown, Jon said eventually. Ned nodded. Neither did I. They stood there in silence, two men bound by blood and lies and legacy. Above them, the wind howled like a direwolf in mourning, but across the wall, the dead did not rest. The army that had tested them once had not scattered. It had grown dot in the far north. Deep within a canyon of snow and jagged ice, the Night King raised his hand over a circle of corpses. His eyes burned with frozen light as the dead began to twitch. Among them stood a familiar face, the corpse of a wildling scout who had seen Castle Black's defenses. His jaw moved. His eyes opened, blue, soulless dot, and behind the Night King, a dragon's roar echoed in the sky, unnatural and low. The long night had only just begun. The wind screamed over the wall like a beast in pain, and every man at Castle Black felt it in his bones. The victory they'd won was temporary, the kind of fragile triumph that came just before the storm returned. Twice as violent, Ned Stark stood atop the ramparts again, his face hard as the ice beneath his boots, eyes fixed northward. Snow fell thick, but even it couldn't hide what now stirred beyond the trees. The ravens had done their work. The north was awakening, but slowly, like an old wolf rising after a long sleep. Robb had sent word back, terse but powerful. "I ride north." It was a promise, but they had little time. Jon moved through the courtyard below, directing men with sharpened orders, organizing defenses, sparring with recruits who no longer laughed at stories of dead men walking. Since the revelation of his bloodline, he'd grown quiet, thoughtful. He was no longer the brooding bastard in black. He was something more. Not just a commander, a symbol. Some brothers whispered it now, behind closed doors. The blood of dragons. Jon hated that Ned saw the shift in his son, the burden pulling at his shoulders. The truth he had carried for years had been passed down, but the weight hadn't lightened, only changed hands. And Jon bore it with that same cold determination Ned had carried since the day he lied to the world for love and honor. Tormund entered the war room with snow clinging to his beard and blood on his axe. "They've moved," he grunted. "Your dead friends, thousands of them, marching east, straight toward Eastwatch." "How long?" Ned asked. 2 days, maybe less. Depends how fast that demon riding the dragon wants to burn through the gates. Jon looked up grim. "We ride at dawn, with whoever will come. Eastwatch can't fall," Ned added. "If they break through the coast, the wall is useless. They'll come around it." A heavy silence fell over the room. Then Ygritte, leaning by the fire, broke it. "You know this'll be the end for most of us, don't you?" Ned nodded. "But it may be the beginning for Westeros." By the next sunrise, a small but determined host gathered. Black cloaks and wildling furs rode together, not as enemies, but as the last stand of the living. Ned rode at Jon's side, Loneclaw sheathed across Jon's back, and ice reforged in Ned's hand. The sword had been shattered by the Lannisters long ago, melted down to the twin blades that served the traitors. But Ned had his own sword now, plain but strong. Not the blade that marked a lord, but one suited for a man who'd become something. Else they reached Eastwatch by nightfall, only to find the castle already under siege. And above it all, the dragon Dot, but not a living one. Viserion, once a beast of fire and fury, now soared above the coastline, wings tattered, eyes glowing. Blue, his roar echoed with death. And when it came down, fire didn't pour from his mouth. Ice did, burning ice that shattered walls and turned stone to frozen powder. The wall cracked. A breach formed, and through it the dead poured like a tide. Jon and Ned didn't hesitate. "We fight," Ned shouted, his voice strong enough to carry over the howling wind and screams. The men charged. Arrows flew. Steel met ice. Dragonglass flashed in the dark. The living screamed, and the dead shrieked, and Viserion's wings blackened the moon. John found himself face to face with the Night King, the creature he'd seen only from a distance. They clashed once, then again. John barely held his ground. Every swing of his blade countered with unnatural strength. And then Ned was there, bloodied, wounded, but unbroken, stepping between his son and death. Their blades struck together. Old man and monster Dot, but the Night King did not fall. With a single gesture, he threw Ned backward like a broken doll. John screamed, diving to his father's side, only to find him alive, coughing blood, eyes still fierce. "Run!" Ned growled, gripping his son's arm. "I won't leave you. You must." In that moment, the dragon swooped low again, and John saw something he hadn't expected. Another figure on its back, Bran, his little brother. But his eyes were white, unblink, I-knee, watching. Dot and the dragon didn't attack John. It veered off. The dead began to retreat. Ned, gasping on the ground, looked into John's eyes. "There's more." "Then you know." And then his hand went limp. John knelt there, tears freezing on his cheeks as the wind picked up again, and the Night King disappeared into the darkness beyond the breach. The wall was broken. Eastwatch was gone, and Eddard Stark had fallen. A second time, the smoke from Eastwatch rose into the night, sky like a black signal to the world, a beacon that death had come through the wall. Snow mixed with ash as Jon Snow stood over his father's body, knees in the frozen dirt, surrounded by silence where there had once been screams. The battle had ended not in victory, but in withdrawal. The dead had left, not because they were defeated, but because they chose to go. Jon's breath misted as he looked down at Ned Stark, the man who had lived with honor, who had died for duty, who had returned from death only to give everything again. His face was calm now, almost peaceful. And yet the weight in Jon's chest was unbearable. The men around him stood in stunned silence. Tormund, Sam, Ygritte, bloodied and silent. Even Ghost, limping but alive, whimpered quietly. The last Lord of Winterfell was gone, and the realm still did not understand what it had lost. Jon carried his father's body back to Castle Black himself. No horse, no cart, only his arms. Every step was a promise, to the north, to the dead, and to the ghosts of his family. When they arrived, the brothers of the Night's Watch gathered silently. Not a single man spoke. Some dropped to one knee. Others simply bowed their heads. Even the wildlings, once enemies of House Stark, showed their respect. Ned was buried in the crypts below Castle Black, not the place of kings, but of men who had watched the world from its edge and gave their lives to it. Jon stood alone at the entrance after the final stone was placed. "You were never just my father," he whispered. "You are my guide, my shield, my truth." His voice cracked. "And now I have to become what you were." That night, Jon summoned the commanders of the Night's Watch, the leaders of the wildlings, and Mr. Aemon. The war council was small, too small, but it was all they had left. "The wall has been breached," Jon said. "Eastwatch is gone. The Night King has a dragon, and now the coast is open." Tormund leaned forward. "And you saw your brother on the beast?" Jon nodded. "I don't know if he was alive, or warged, or something else, but it was Bran, and he wasn't fighting us. He watched." Sam shifted nervously. Could Bran be helping them? Or worse, could he be one of them now? "No," Jon said firmly. "He's still in there. He has to be. If we lose Bran, we lose everything." Mr. Aemon cleared his throat. "Then what is your plan, Lord Snow?" Jon looked around the room. His eyes were tired. His hands still shook. But when he spoke, there was no hesitation. "Ride to Winterfell." "You mean retreat?" One brother asked. I mean, regroup, John snapped. The North is rallying. Robb is marching. The old houses are stirring. We make Winterfell our stronghold. We light the beacons. We summon every man, woman, and child who can hold a blade. Because this is it. He pointed north. They're coming. Not to fight a battle. To end us. Tormund banged his fist on the table. Then we give them hell. And so they rode again. The journey south was bitter. Villages had already been abandoned. The dead had moved faster than anyone expected. At night they heard them. Howls in the trees, footsteps where no man should walk. But they reached Winterfell, and when they did, the gates opened not with suspicion, but relief. Robb Stark stood at the gate. His armor was scratched, his eyes sunken. But when he saw Jon, he pulled him into a silent embrace. I thought I'd lost you too, he said. Jon's voice was hoarse. You did. In the days that followed, the banners of the North gathered like crows to a field. Manderly, Glover, Karstark, even some who had betrayed Robb before, now came crawling back. Faces full of shame and fear. Not one man asked about Ned. They all knew. The look in Jon's eyes said everything. A week later, Jon stood atop the walls of Winterfell, looking to the horizon dot, and there, at last, they appeared. A great fog rolled toward them, unnatural and thick. The snow stopped falling. The wind went still, and out of the mist came the first wave, dead men. Thousands dot, and behind them, the Night King. Upon the back of a dead dragon dot, and beside him, floating in silence. Bran Dot, or what was once Bran. Jon drew his sword. Winterfell's bells rang. The last war had come dot, and in the frozen heart of Winterfell, buried beneath stone and honor, lay the man who had warned them all, Ned Stark. Gone, but never forgotten.